Okay. V'lovash HaKohen midovad. And the Kohen, we're speaking about the ordinary Kohen. He wears his midovad, his linen vestment. The vestments of the ordinary Kohen are referred to as bigdei lovan, the white vestments. They were made of linen. Umichles evad yilbash habasoro, and pants made of linen he should wear on his flesh. Now it's very interesting. The law is that the vestments which a Kohen wears have to fit exactly to his size. The halacha that a Kohen hedged, an ordinary Kohen, if he wears the bigdei Kohen Gadol, if he wears the vestments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, it's not a valid avoda because the ordinary Kohen wears 4 vestments and the Kohen Gadol wears 8 vestments. That's called yitu begodim. He's wearing too many vestments. And the Kohen Gadol, who's supposed to wear 8 vestments, if he wears the 4, which are the vestments of the Kohen Hedged, it's not valid, the avoda, because he's not wearing sufficient vestments. He's only wearing 4, not the 8. Each one based on his station and responsibility as a Kohen must wear the vestments which are appropriate to him. So the Kohen Gadol must wear 8, the Kohen Hedged, the ordinary Kohen wears 4. Now, even the 4 that you wear, they must fit. They must fit the Kohen. If they're too small, too large, also it's not valid. And that's meaning of midovad. Mido. It has to be based on his mido. It has to fit to size. If it doesn't fit to size, it's not valid. So Rashi says, midovad. Hiaktonis, it's referring to the shirt. Mido. What is the meaning of the word mido? Shtei kemidoso. It has to be fit to size. What's al besoro? Shlo yido v'chotzis beintayim. Nothing should separate between the vestment and his flesh. Meaning, let's say he would have a bandage on his flesh, and that separates between the vestment and his flesh. It's not valid. It's called the chatzitza. Just as one goes to the mikveh, if one has an adhesion on his body and he goes into the water is not touching every part of his body. Identically, the vestment, there can be no separation between the vestment and his flesh. And this is what it means, al besoro. We had mentioned the Shalom Kodosh that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to officiate without vestments. Why? So we had said that his body, the original understanding at time of creation was that what is the essence of the person? The essence of the person is his neshama. But the neshama, the soul, being totally spiritual, is not functional to actualize and do the action. So you need the body to facilitate the intent of the soul. So what is the vestment of the soul? The vestment of the soul is the body. But after Adam had eaten of the Eitz Hadas, which is Tov v'Ra, which contained evil, so the vestment, which is the body, became invalidated. So therefore, we have to have a replacement vestment. Therefore, the Kohen Hedged wears the 4 vestments, the white vestments, and the Kohen Gadol, he has 8. That's the equivalent, and that's l'chover tiferes. That glorifies him, that puts him in the state where he's acceptable to officiate. Because the body additionally was given to serve Hashem. It's been disqualified, been validated due to the Eitz Hadas, so he needs the vestments to compensate for that. Moshe did not need that. Now, just as the body is created to fit the soul, the fit is perfect. Everybody's body accommodates that neshama. So just as the body initially was the vestment, and the body is made to size, so to say, identically, the vestment is made to size. If the vestment is too small or the vestment is too large, so therefore it's not the equivalent of what? Of the body, which is supposed to fit the soul, to accommodate the soul, to facilitate the soul. As a result of that, the Torah says it has to be midovad. It has to be kimidoso, it has to fit the size. It doesn't fit the size, although the avoda is done, is not valid. The Gemara in Tzvachim uses a term, bigdeim aleim, when their vestments are upon them, when they officiate, kuanosam aleim. That priesthood is in effect. Ein bigdeim aleim. If their vestments are not upon them, not wearing the vestments, ein kuanosam aleim. The kun is not there. They're a non-functioning Kohen. I mean, as a person to contaminate himself, he's not permitted. But within the context of officiating, bigdeim aleim kuanosam aleim. If they're wearing the vestments, then they function as they're a functional Kohen. Ein bigdeim aleim ein kuanosam aleim. Again, what are the vestments? The vestments are the equivalent of the body to facilitate the avoda. So therefore, it has to be midovad. It has to fit the size. If it doesn't fit the size, it's not similar to the body. Therefore, it's not a valid service for that reason. Okay? And just as the body is directly in contact with the soul, that every part of the soul is intertwined with the body, identically, there could be nothing separating between the vestment and the body. Therefore, chatzitza, if there's any adhesion or any separation between the vestment and the flesh of the Kohen, it's not a valid avoda for that reason. He removes the ash, which which the fire had consumed the burnt offering. Ala mizbeach. This is called Trumas Hadeshin. It's the tithing of the ash, which is on the mizbeach. This is what remains from what was burnt the previous day, and he tithes that ash. V'samol etzel mizbeach. He places it alongside the mizbeach. So Rashi explains, Hadeshen tochel eish esa'olo v'oso deshen. The fire turned it into ash. Mosadeshen yorem truma. From that ash, which was originally the burnt offering was consumed, from that ash, he puts it alongside the mizbeach. Normally we say that the Gemara says in a number of locations, the blood of the korban has a consecrated status. Because when you consecrate the animal is consecrated. The blood they would sprinkle on the mizbeach, which was the conclusion of the atonement service, where would that blood go? So the Gemara tells us that under the mizbeach there was a drain, and the drain actually would allow the blood to flow to a valley. It was called Nachal Kidron. And there, when the blood would go there, the one who oversaw the financial affairs of the Beis Hamikdash, they would sell that blood as fertilizer to fertilize fields. So the question is this: if the blood is consecrated, how could you use it afterwards for fertilizer? It's consecrated. So Morris says there's a concept known as nasa mitzvoso. Initially, why, when something's consecrated, why you're not permitted to benefit from it or to appropriate for any other usage other than it was consecrated for, because it's called Kodesh Hashem. Since when it was consecrated, it's exclusively reserved for God's usage, so to say. If you violate its designation, it's Torah violation. But once it's been expended and it's been utilized for its purpose, the Gemara uses a term, nasa mitzvoso. the mitzvah has been accomplished. So once it's been utilized for its original designation, it reverts back to an ordinary status. That's the concept. Nasa mitzvoso. Therefore, the blood, once the blood was sprinkled, and what was the value of the consecration of the animal and its blood? To bring about atonement. So once this blood was sprinkled on the mizbeach, on the altar, it's accomplished what it was meant to accomplish, what its original designation was, and as a result of this, it takes on an ordinary status. Therefore, they were permitted to sell the blood to the gardeners to fertilize the fields, to the farmers to fertilize the fields. That's what the Gemara says. However, in regard to the ash, which they tied from the Mizbeach, the Torah says, V'samoitz al Mizbeach. After you do the mitzvah of tithing the ash, it says you must put it alongside the Mizbeach, it retains its consecrated status. And the Gemara asks, but according to this principle, that Nasa Mitzvoso, that once it's been utilized for its original designation, it reverts back to an ordinary status. So why must you put it next to the Mizbeach? Evidently because it's retaining its Kedusha. It retains its consecrated status. So we see from here that even though something that once it's consecrated, although the mitzvah has been completed, it retains its original designated status. That's the Gemara's question. So our answer is that this is the exception. That the ash that you tithe from the Mizbeach, and you put it alongside the Mizbeach, it's the exception. The principle is normally Nasa Mitzvah, so once the mitzvah has been expended, it's been utilized for its original designation, it reverts back to an ordinary status. However, in regard to the ash, that's the exception. We don't say Nasa Mitzvah. So once when we studied Brachos, the Gemara in Brachos asks a contradiction. Something very, very beautiful. Something my Rosh Hashanah Baruch once said. The Gemara asks a contradiction. There are two psukim in Tehillim, which seemingly David contradicts himself. David says, La Hashem ha'oretz u'mloah. The world in its entirety belongs to Hashem, the terrestrial and the celestial. And then he says, Hashemayim shemayim l'Hashem v'oretz nosal l'vnei Adam. Heaven is God's, and the terrestrial level was given to mankind. So if it was given to mankind, that means Lashem Oretz. It's not Lashem Oretz Meloah. The terrestrial level is not God's. Of course, it was given to mankind. So how do we reconcile the two statements of David in Tehillim? That's the Gemara's question. So our answer is, Kan Kodem Brocha, Kan Lacha Brocha. Before, because the Gemara says over there, Klanena Olam Hazeh B'li Brocha. A person who benefits from this world without first acknowledging that God is the master, the king of the universe, it's moal. It's like benefiting for something that was consecrated. Why? Because that's Lashem Oretz U'mloah. But once you've acknowledged that it's Hashem's, by saying the bracha, by saying Hashem Elokeinu Melech Ha'olam, whatever, Shakol Ne'i B'dvoro, once you've acknowledged that, now it reverts back to man. Then it's given to man. Why? So you would explain it this way. The Navi says, what is the ultimate objective of creation? The Navi says, L'chvodi barosiv. I created this existence for my glory, for my honor. So you should recognize who I am. That's the purpose. That's L'shem ha'oretz u'mloah. So it's consecrated. Its value is that. But let's say once you've addressed that, and it's accomplished that, and you do recognize that, and you said, Hashem Elokeinu Melech Ha'olam Bar Pri'etz. So what have you done? You've utilized and addressed its purpose, because you do recognize. Once you recognize that God is the creator, God is the master of the universe, it's accomplished its purpose, it reverts back to an ordinary status. Pre-bracha, it still has its designated value. What's its designation? For you to recognize who is the master. Once you've recognized who's the master, it reverts back to an ordinary status, because that's Nasas Mitzvah. Because the mitzvah has actually been fulfilled, and it's what it was designated for has been already accomplished, therefore reverts back to Horetz Nosal L'vnei Adam. This is how my Rosh Hashanah Baruch explained to Gemara in Brachos. So the same thing, it's based on this concept of Nasis Mitzvah, so similar to the blood. Once it's been sprinkled on the Mizbeach and it's accomplished the atonement, it reverts back to an ordinary status and therefore can be used as fertilizer to be sold to the farmers, the gardeners, to fertilize their fields for that reason. You know, it's an interesting halacha. If a person has ownership in something, whatever it may be, and you want to transfer that ownership to a third party, it has to be transferred through some kind of act to bring about that transfer. Whether you have to give value, whether you have to take physical possession, you need an instrument of transfer. Without an instrument of transfer, ownership doesn't transfer from one party to the other. If I own something, I say, it should be yours, it doesn't become yours. Unless I did an overt act and you were involved or somebody representing you were involved in that act, the ownership doesn't transfer to the other party. But yet, when it comes to consecration, we say, that when we speak and we commit ourselves to God and say it should be God's, that's the equivalent of transferring it to an ordinary person, as if we used an instrument of transfer. We speak about transferring something to God's domain, words are sufficient. When we speak transferring to an ordinary person's domain, you need an instrument of transfer. Why? So you'd say, well, because the Torah says so. Ishki Yagdish Kodesh Hashem. If a person consecrates something to Hashem, it becomes holy. But what is the mechanics? How does it work? So there's a Miri. The Miri explains above a Basra. David HaMelech says, L'Hashem ha'oretzim loah. The world initially, its entirety belongs to God. God gives you permission to partake of His world. So even when we use and we utilize His world, it's still His. It's like I invite you to my home. And I say you could benefit from all the amenities of my home. You could eat whatever you want. But once you say, I've had enough, and I'm not eating anymore, what's left, whose is it? It's the host. It belongs to the host. The location is the host, the foods, everything's the host's. So when we're talking about two commoners, where initially the third party want to transfer it, has no relevance to the ownership of it, you need an overt act to bring about the transfer of ownership. Therefore, you need an instrument of transfer to transfer it from domain A to domain B. But with God, where everything is His, and we're partaking of His, of course, He gives us permission to partake of His. So the moment we say, Hashem, it's back in your court, it's back in your domain, therefore words are sufficient. One doesn't need the overt act instrument of transfer to bring about that end result. That's the Miri's explanation why we say words are sufficient and one doesn't need the actual act of transfer for that reason.